Next week, Tory MPs head to Birmingham for the party's annual conference. This time, they're looking to try and shape the debate over who should take over the Tory party from Rishi Sunak after a pretty devastating election loss. I sat down with the 4 candidates, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly, where I asked them about some of the policy issues dominating this contest and also what the naughtiest thing they ever did was. Some are more honest than others. I hope you enjoy. Why do you think the Tories lost the 2024 election?
We lost the ear of the British public. They stopped listening to us. I think we had overpromised and underdelivered on a load of issues, which meant that when we came into the general election with new promises, we were met with real cynicism. People had literally closed their ears, their minds to our arguments. So even if we'd had the best policy platform in the world, people weren't willing to give us the time of day. If we make fewer promises, but make sure we deliver on all of those promises, we will regain the trust of the British people. And that means being disciplined.
The government didn't address properly, in a truly conservative way, the big issues. We made promises, we didn't keep them. We lacked the courage to do the things that were necessary and which the public would expect of conservatives, like reforming the NHS or like delivering proper supply side reforms to get out of this cycle of low economic growth, poor productivity growth that we face as a country and have done for years, like failure to address immigration and to heed the warnings that I gave at the turn of the year. That was the real reason.
When I was campaigning, I'd knock on one door and the person there would say, "You're too left-wing." And I'd knock on their next door neighbour's door. "You're too right-wing." A few doors down, somebody would say, "You're too centrist." But the bottom line was people didn't really understand what we stood for. They just thought we were telling them whatever it was they wanted to hear. And I think to some extent that was true. We were not leading, we were following. Having focus groups, asking people what is it that you want, and then trying to offer them that is not true politics. It's the Henry Ford problem. Henry Ford said that if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse rather than a car. Real politics and real leadership is about showing the way and getting other people to follow you, not just asking them what it is they want and trying to split the difference. That is where managerialism creeps in.
Well, there's many reasons, but the fundamental one is we lost the trust of the British people. I mean, let's be absolutely clear. A lot of people chose to vote either Reform or Lib Dem or Green or in a few cases Labour because they had simply stopped trusting us. They'd seen us arguing amongst ourselves. They didn't know who to believe, who to listen to. And they went, well, if you can't agree, then there's no way I'm choosing you.
How far do you think that the party needs to go to control migration? And do you think leaving the ECHR is a step too far?
Reform doesn't exist. It's a binary choice. You either leave or you remain. And I think we should leave. There are those who say that we should attempt to derogate. That's impossible. So I think we all face a simple choice. Do you want to remain within it? If you remain within it, you are consigning this country to illegal migration for decades to come, with all the consequences that flow from that. Or you can leave, fix these problems once and for all, and then settle the migration challenge that we've faced as a country and move on to talk about the other things that we care about in British politics, like education, the environment, the health service, the economy. That's where I am. I think that's where the membership of the Conservative Party is. And I think that's what we can persuade the country is the right way forward for us all.
Other candidates have talked about leaving the ECHR on day one. I actually think we need to be far more radical than that. We need a root and branch reform of immigration because people who are in the ECHR, like Spain, for example, are able to deport illegal immigrants properly in a way that we can't do here. It's because we have people in our Home Office who man our borders who don't really want to do that. They want to look after refugees. So dealing with the people, having a strategy for what kind of people we want coming into our country is absolutely key. Then you can have a cap. Then you can talk about maybe leaving the ECHR if it's not working at that point. But starting with leaving just shows that we haven't learned the lessons of Brexit, for example, or even net zero, where we say we're going to do this thing without working out the consequences, without working out what it entails.
It's not necessary to leave the ECHR to tackle small boats, but what it is necessary to do is to be absolutely committed to the security of the British people. And that's why I set out actually something I've been setting out since 2013. I first wrote on the ECHR in 2013, just after I'd left the army, and before, in fact, I was even a parliamentary candidate, which is that the ECHR doesn't always work in the way that it should. Now, other countries have responded to this by opting out of certain elements. That's called derogation.
Look at the United States of America, which has a very activist legal system. They are not members of the ECHR, and yet they really struggle with deportations and returns. There are no silver bullet solutions to this. And anyone who is promising a silver bullet solution, I think, is slipping into the habit that we got into at the last Parliament, making big, bold promises that are not that easy to deliver. That's what got us in trouble in the first place. So let's not do that again.
Do you think Elon Musk has been a good thing for freedom of speech?
I think Elon Musk has been a fantastic thing for freedom of speech. I will hold my hand up and say I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. And I look at Twitter before he took over and after. There's a lot more free speech. It means there are many, many more things that I see that I don't like, but I also know that views are not suppressed the way that they were. And I think that there was a cultural establishment that was very left that controlled quite a lot of discourse on that platform.
We're seeing lies grow in the darkness, and we're seeing some states exploiting the anonymity of the online world to spread frank untruths that, were they to be able to challenge, as you'd be challenging me and the way we challenge each other in open forum, they wouldn't happen. So I think there's an honesty element here as well. If you are running a platform that is entirely dominated by anonymous bots, is that freedom of speech, or is that just propaganda? That's not the same thing. If what you're doing is you're allowed to say whatever you like, but you put your name to it, that is freedom of speech, and it should be defended absolutely.
Elon Musk bought what was then Twitter and set about changing it because his perception was that Twitter was silencing right-of-centre voices. A lot of people like having their thumb on the scales as long as the scales are weighed in their favour. And of course, when someone comes along with perhaps a bigger thumb and pushes harder on the other side of the scale, then suddenly everyone cries foul. So be very, very careful about curtailing voices that you disagree with, because you might not always be the ones in charge of who gets to speak and who doesn't.
I don't have a strong opinion, to be honest, on Elon Musk. You know,
You're not going to have an AI summit.
I'm interested in AI, but I'm not going to be booking a tete-a-tete with Elon Musk anytime soon.
What is the least conservative policy of the last 14 years?
Of vaccine passports. That's why I voted against it.
I suppose all of us got to recognise that our response to COVID was inherently interventionist. The social restrictions that we introduced, I think all of us now look back on and say that was far, far, far too much. This is a Conservative Party, and we cancelled Christmas. I mean, Boris Johnson and Oliver Cromwell, you know, the two national leaders that in our history have cancelled Christmas, and you wouldn't have expected the Venn diagram of Oliver Cromwell and Boris Johnson to have much of a crossover.
I think it was failing to tackle the Blairite inheritance that we got, just as Tony Blair accepted the Thatcherite consensus in some respects. We wrongly accepted what he left us, the legacy of laws that he put in place, like the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, the Climate Change Act. These are laws that make it immensely difficult for ministers to get on and do the job.
There's so many things which I disagreed with, but the least conservative one, the smoking ban, I voted against it. I think it was violating multiple principles. Personal responsibility, it violated. Equality under the law, it violated. You know, treating people who might have been born days apart differently.
For Theresa May, it was fields of wheat. What is the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
If you want to know the naughtiest things, you can go back and look at John Pinar's podcast from back in 2015.
I was actually quite naughty as a child and a teenager. So a lot of the things I probably should not enter the public domain. I'll give you one, which is I'm afraid is by no means the naughtiest thing I did. After a few too many drinks as a teenager, I did accept a bet to climb the Christmas tree in Wolverhampton city centre, and that did not end well.
I don't care to say. It definitely is not running through fields of wheat, but I'm not going to tell you the naughtiest thing I've ever done. I
invaded a country once. A few years ago, when 20 2003, I was part of the invading army in Iraq.